Hello, I'm hopefully going to be a best-selling fantasy author one day, but I won't turn out to be a transphobic monster. Leo, and welcome to In Bed with a BL. So, one of the main reasons I talked about this in my video I released a couple of days ago, that I've been too busy to edit my videos, is I've been working on a book. So this is my official announcement, well, at least official on YouTube, because if you follow me on Twitter or Facebook or Instagram, I've already talked about this to other people. But I officially finished my first draft and I'm currently editing it right now. So I wrote a book. My book is about 130,000 word fantasy story called Welcome to Hell. I'll put my mock-up book cover here, which I probably won't use the final version because I'm going to pay a book cover artist to make a proper book cover, but I thought it'd be really cool. It's going to be a fantasy story that stars, the main character is going to be a gay youth, so I thought talking about it here, where I talk about like other gay love stories, might be interesting to you. Trigger warning, there are talks about suicide, so kind of like Until We Meet Again, the book does start with a suicide and talks about the ramifications of that. Pretty much what happens is Samael, the main character, dies and goes to the underworld, but his boyfriend Adam survives the double suicide. So unlike Until We Meet Again, there's no reincarnation where we meet in next life. Samael is actually going to travel through the underworld and try to find a way back to the living realm to find Adam, his boyfriend. So kind of like a reverse Divine Comedy. I personally reimagined the underworld, and I have my whole new magic system and things like that. I took mythology and folklore and characters from all parts of the earth because I figured the afterlife would have more than just white Christians in it. I'm spending a lot of time trying to make sure that all the characters are put during my editing phase. So during my editing phase, I'm trying to make sure all the characters I write in are proper and not like offensive or weird stereotypes, because I will be involving a lot of people of color and also a lot of different sexual backgrounds. Because, like I said, it's going to be more than just straight, cisgendered, white Christians in the underworld. This is the whole underworld, all religions, all people go here in my story. So hopefully that'll be really cool. I'm super excited about it. And what I'm thinking about is I'm going to start a small playlist, Dream Diary, where I talk about my writing process. Obviously, I have not even debuted my first book yet, so I'm extremely amateur and not professional yet. But I want to record the things I'm doing for each step. And if you're watching this, maybe you will find something I do interesting and helpful, or after I'm done with everything, I can make another video and talk about why everything I did was wrong. I thought it might be interesting to do this, and maybe it would be helpful for you if you want to write your own story or you're curious about my writing process. So this video is going to be about my drafting process. I did finish it a little while ago, and I'm currently on the editing process, which is taking a lot longer than I expected. Most people online said that it takes double the amount of time to write it, which I hope is untrue, because it took a really long time to write my first draft. I could give George R.R. Martin a run for his money. But anyways, I'm going to talk about my first draft writing experience, the things I did, the steps I took, and maybe if you are writing your first draft, you can find some of these steps interesting and helpful for you. I already gave you the basis of what my story is about. I gave you a little summary about it. Hope you find it really interesting. Maybe I'll talk about more if you guys have questions below about my story. I can answer and make another video that talks about more of my story. But started this story a long time ago in university because I wrote the first chapter as a short story for a creative writing class. So the base of my story, the way I came up with it, the hook I made for myself to write it, was based off a short story I made. And I pretty much just turned that into chapter 1. I changed it a little bit so it wouldn't just end, and then I went further along and made it into this huge epic fantasy story. So for the first 100 pages, I did not plot anything, I pantsed it. If you are new to the writing world, plotting and pantsing are as follows. If you are a plotter, if you plot your story, that means you have a skeleton, you write down, you have an outline, or you did some sort of pre-writing situation where you know where your story is going to go. You plot it out. You're a plotter. pantsing is when you just write everything kind of like freestyle, and you don't really know exactly where you're gonna go. You're just gonna start writing, and wherever you end up, that's good for you. They're kind of like the two different camps. Some people think plotting is better, some people think being a pantser is better. So I personally started off the first 100 pages pantsing. This is my first time writing a book, or writing something like this, so I wanted to try this out, and I didn't know exactly where I wanted to go, so I just free wrote. I hand write everything. I'll talk about that more later. So I hand wrote all 100 pages, and I got to where I need to go. But then, after a while, I wanted to plot out the rest of my story, because I have been watching videos and reading online articles and listening to podcasts about writing experiences, and a lot of people recommended plotting out to make sure you don't stray too far from the path. I personally did not want my characters to dictate what happened. I have a story in my head, or I had a story in my head. I knew where I wanted to end up, so I didn't want to stray too far, because I'm easily distracted and there's a lot of cool mythologies out there. So I stopped at the 100 pages and started plotting where I wanted to go. The way I did this is, I read this online somewhere. I'll see if I can find the article and put it down. But I started with the end. So during my writing class, actually a long time ago, I had to come up with 4 different endings for if I made the short story into a long story, which proved to be really helpful because I ended up using that assignment for this book. But so I already had the endings I had in play, and all of them were kind of the same, but just different outcomes. And pretty much the one I chose was the frame of mind I was in when getting to that point. There's a happy one, a sad one, a really sad one, and like a normal one. So I started from there, because even though the endings are different, they're kind of in the same place. And then I worked backwards to the last 100 page, like where I stopped writing. The article recommended doing this because when you're going backwards, it changes the way you think, and it forces you to make a detail or understand how the character got there. Like, for example, the last page, your character's in a hospital. So you have to figure out, well, why are they in a hospital? Then you hop there and you're like, oh, they did this. It's like, okay, well, how did they get to that place? Like, how did they get on the street? How did they do that? How did they do that? So I found it really helpful to force me to think how they got to each set piece and location. In my brain, I had a bunch of different scenes and I had an order, but there are some places where I didn't really understand how to connect them. So doing this method, working backwards while making the plot outline, was really beneficial to me because it helped me tie them up a lot nicer and prettier. When doing the plotting, I had a special book where I made my plot outline. Well, first, I did my world building. A lot of people really like to do world building, and I have a lot of pages. It's not the whole thing, it's about just half, of world building character bios. I did character bios for the main characters, and then some important side characters, and then the antagonist, and then important world history for my underworld. So my underworld starts at the dawn of creation and up until present day. So there's a lot of information that won't be in the story, but it's good to know so I can reference it in the book. I tried to draw really terrible pictures, so embarrassing, to explain certain things. So I felt this was really helpful. I would go to restaurants, and while waiting for my food, I would just kind of like info dump here. So a lot of writers during podcasts, they say that they do a lot of world building, but like 10% or less of what you world build won't end up in your story. But it helps you give a good skeleton of the world so it feels fleshed out even if you don't put everything in. So I definitely don't have everything in my story, but it was really cool, and world building is really, really fun. So I recommend it as a good exercise. I also did character bios where there's information just like world building I don't use, but it helps me dictate their personality. Like I said earlier, I didn't want my characters to like take the reins on my story. I know some authors say that sometimes their characters won't listen to them, and I don't fully understand that. But I didn't want that to be a thing. I knew where I wanted my story to go, and I knew I wanted my characters to go there. So I put down a lot of information to build their personality, and I did do some tweaking of who said what, or maybe why the actions happened to make it fit their personality better, but I didn't want to veer off too much. So there's a lot of personality. I had like age, their hair color, some of their favorite stuff, things that wouldn't appear in the book but helped me have this as a 3D character, three-dimensional character for my story. And then I have my actual plot, which I'm going to blur most of this out, but it's a line, it's a skeleton. There are about 24 different plot points that I want to do, and I did move some around as I was writing when I thought that they would make sense other places. So while you're writing, you can discover things. I discovered that like one scene would actually work better earlier on, so I did that. So I did all of this before I started writing the next 100 pages because I wanted to know where I was. Yeah. And like I said, I hand wrote, so I continued handwriting. So this is my full manuscript. It's a lot of books and pages, about, 4 different notebooks, and then a bunch of loose leaf pages. I'm really glad I live in a world of computers, because if this is what I gave to an agent, or if I tried to sell this myself and gave this to a bookmaker, nothing would ever happen. So handwriting is easier for me. I actually hate typing, but I knew I needed to type in general. So I hand wrote everything first, and then I typed it up. The way I did it is I wrote about 40 to 50 pages, and then I would stop and type those up. This was really time consuming, but it was really helpful for me because it almost gave me like an extra safety net proofreading. So by the time I was done writing and typing everything for my first draft, I was kind of on version 2, because I would alter sentences while typing them, because I would read them aloud, or there were parts where I wrote the same sentence like 4 times in a row. So it slimmed down my word count already, things like that. So it was beneficial for me because it was faster. I can handwrite almost twice as fast as I can type. So I was able to finish it a lot faster, and then I got the proofreading and extra like mini editing while typing it there. And that was the end result. I needed to be typed anyways. So that was pretty much my writing experience. Like I said, I hand wrote everything, and then I would type it up. I started off as a pantser, but then I did my outlining and character bios, which maybe once I build my website, I'll put them up. But it also helped me develop my, actually, this is really helpful. After I did my outline, it helped me solidify my twists and turns. So I already knew a lot of the twists and turns my story would have, so I was able to put like little Easter eggs or hints in earlier things while I was writing them. I was always personally really curious about how authors did that because they make it seem so seamless. Hopefully I do too. Hopefully mine are seamless and interesting and full of intrigue, where you go, oh, that's what that meant. So, but that helped me do it because I already knew all the twists and turns before I wrote them. So I think it helped me make my scenes better. Now I'm going to talk about some tips for writing your first draft that I did. First and foremost, I read a lot of articles, I listened to a lot of podcasts, and I watched a lot of YouTube videos of other authors. I did mostly watch people doing indie publishing. So there are 2 main types of publishing your book. Traditional is when you get an agent and get to one of a publishing house. So that is when you like pretty much sell your story, sell your idea to a publishing house, and they make the books and stuff like that. That is what most people usually aim to do because that's like the real writer kind of thing. But you also lose a lot of the rights to your story because you're selling it to another person. You still have some ownership over it, but from what I've read, they can kind of force your hand sometimes, and you might lose some of the essence of your story. But that a lot of people like that because they take on a lot of the cost of editing, which is really expensive. And I'll talk about that when I do my editing video because I'm very scared to drop all that money. But they also take away some of your creative freedom. So I listen to a lot of podcasts for independent publishing routes because I think that's what I'm going to try to do. Because Even though you have to pay more, you get to keep a lot of your creative freedom, but you need to know a lot more things. So I was listening to a lot of videos. I will put some links down below of things I watched or podcasts I listened to that were helpful to me. So I did that when I wasn't writing. Like, I'll go to the gym and listen to a podcast, or if I'm bored and in bed, I'll just watch a video on YouTube, and it helped me learn about tropes, common tropes, tropes that people don't like. So a trope is just a basis. A trope is something that's common in stories, and tropes are good. That's like something people like. It's like a street. It's paved and people know where to go with it. And a trope versus a cliche. A cliche is something that's overdone, it's hacky, it's overused. It's a trope that's used too often. A cliche is a trope, but a trope is not always a cliche. So I watch videos to figure out what are those. I watched to figure out genres and what tropes are good in genres, what tropes don't fit in some genres. That's how I was able to figure out that my story, I started off as like a YA because I thought it was like popular, but I figured out what I was writing and stuff like that was more adult fantasy. So it's helpful to get that basis, and also just different people's opinions can help you change your characters and like what you're actually aiming for. Tip number 2, I use Google Docs to type everything. I like Google Docs because the autosave function. I'm very unlucky, so I was always scared that I would spend a lot of time typing, which I already said I hate doing, and then my computer would die or something would happen, and I would lose a lot of progress. So Google Docs has the autosave, so everything you type, it saves, and that made me feel really assured. After I was done typing for the day, I would copy everything I typed and put it on a document that was on my hard disk drive on my computer as like a second version in case something happened to my Google. So I always had my physical first draft copies, which I don't think are in order anymore, so I hope I never have to go back to them. And then I had my Google, and then I had my second copy on my hard drive. So in case something happened, I could always go back to something else, which is really good. I also had a copy on my Google Docs. So for some reason, I accidentally deleted that document. I still had a copy that I would update constantly, so it would be the same. So I had 2 copies of Google Docs, a hard copy and my physical copy. Well, a copy on my hard drive and a hard physical copy. Tip number 3, writing can take a long time, and I was always trying to figure out how I can squeeze writing into my daily life. Some of the podcasts I listened to would say do like writing sprints or put time together. I have trouble paying attention and keeping on track of one thing unless it's like a video game or a movie or something. So I had to really work at it. I started doing 10 to 15 minute writing sprints. So the sprint is just you sit down and just write for 10 to 15 minutes. So I put a timer on my cell phone, like throw my phone to the other side of the room and just start typing. So I wouldn't look at my phone and not be distracted. I constantly added more and more minutes, and now I'm up to 2 to 3 hours, depending on how much time I have in my day. I usually do it before I went to bed, because I still had to go work during the day, and then I'd go to gym and eat dinner. So I now do like 2 to 3 hour writing sprints, and that's how I was able to finish my first draft. So, and I also try to do it every single day. So I built up the habit of doing it small amounts every single day, and once I had that habit down, I started making it longer. Having your timer in the phone somewhere far away helped me not be distracted. I still had my computer when typing, so sometimes I would go to another tab and work on a website, but it was still better than just having my phone and like a text message or something like that. Next tip, I had music. I think I always have to have music playing on my headphones or in the background. I need background noise as a human being. So lo-fi music mixes on YouTube became my best friends. They're really long and they tend to be the same throughout. Like some of them can be like 4 hours long and they don't change too much. So you won't like get angry at a new song that pops up like a playlist, and you also won't waste time going, oh, skip that song, skip that song, skip that song. So I found lo-fi mixes to be very, very helpful. There were 3 main ones I used while writing. I use Halloween and autumn themed ones for just like my normal scenes to just help me get into like the spooky mood. Like this is a supernatural fantasy in the underworld, so that was really kind of helpful and beneficial to me. And then during battle scenes, I have a lot of fight scenes. I would use like Japanese style trap and bass mixes, and it helped me like get into a fighting spirit, I guess. I don't know. I'm gonna put some down there below, and I'll put some pictures up here of different mixes I used on YouTube. And then there are also some 50s and 60s like old song vibe mixes that I liked, which if I was not in the mood for autumn or Halloween, I'd listen to those during my like casual chill moments in my book. So I highly recommend lo-fi mixes because they're great background music. There's not too many lyrics, so you don't get distracted, and it just helps set a really cool mood. The final tip I use is during the first draft of writing and typing, this is when I started setting up my author platform. So I set up my Twitter, and I started kind of using my Instagram for this. I use Twitter a lot because that seems to be the most popular, and I use this to find other authors, find some readers. I would put polls out for questions I had about my own story to see how other people would react. In the beginning, I did not have many followers, so most of my polls weren't that helpful, but it's better to be seen because writing your first draft and editing is a long process. So if you spend the time building everything, by the time you need to do your marketing and your pre-release debut scheduling, you have some sort of fan base or friendship base where people can help you and you're more visible. I also set up this YouTube channel. So I have a couple subscribers, and hopefully by the time I'm done, I have even more subscribers. And this YouTube channel is about like gay movies and TV shows, and my book is about gay people. So also as I talk about these shows and movies, I think about tropes and things I like and things I don't like, so I can use them for my own writing. So it's good to start this stuff early. I also just set up a Facebook account just for my author platform to find Facebook groups that deal with writing and beta readers and things like that. So it's good to start your platform early. That's what I found out. So hopefully that is beneficial. That is my video on writing my first draft. Hopefully this is helpful and good. I've never done an instructional video before. Also, like I said before, I am very amateur, I'm not professional, so this advice might not be the most helpful for you. But if it was, I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you learned something, and definitely check out my story. I will release some more videos later. You can follow me on Twitter and my author Facebook or Instagram if you want to know more about Samael and Welcome to Hell. I'll see you later. Bye.